right, today is March 27, 2018. We're ready to start. Let's call the meeting to order and say the pledge of allegiance. The flag is up. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you everybody for being here tonight. First item is the approval of the minutes for the regular meeting from February 27th, 2018.
Motion to approve the minutes for the regular meeting. Oh, yeah.
You got it?
Yeah.
Sorry about that. Go ahead.
It's a good call.
Go ahead,
For
please.
the regular meeting as submitted.
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Next is the executive session meeting minutes from February 27th, 2018. Has everybody had a chance to review those minutes?
There, just did. Motion to approve the executive session minutes for February 27, 2018 as submitted.
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Next on the agenda is the chairman's report. Tonight is Adam Causey's last night with us. He's moving on to bigger and better projects, and he has generally offered to buy everybody here a beer after the meetings. Thank you, Adam.
Man. Sticking around to
In
his
all
life.
seriousness, we would not be here where we are without Adam's efforts. He was here soon after we started, got us through some very difficult times, has taken a lot of very delicate maneuvering. Really appreciate all your insight and all your help and dedication. And so I'm looking forward to buying you a beer after the meeting.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. It really has been kind of the pinnacle of my professional career to work here for the city of Chamblee, and I'll miss it. It's bittersweet. This is a move for my family first and foremost, so it's not one that I take lightly, and so I will definitely miss it here a lot. And we'll always keep track on stuff here. I'm going to keep track of the, since you record it, maybe I'll be able to watch the meetings down from afar.
The 15 people.
That's right.
Those cold May nights.
Yes, that's probably by the fire.
Well, good. Well, we'll look forward to seeing you in the future, and I'm sure you know that there'll be many questions that will follow you as we're trying to piece everything together going forward.
I won't change my number just yet.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is the financial report.
Okay. There are, I guess, a dozen pages or so if you would care to peruse them. Really no major changes. I would call attention if you look at the third page. Yes, gives probably the most interesting things that shows the overall revenue and expenses for the past 2 months. Shows $77,000 payment from Homestead, a $50,000 bond issuance fee that was associated with the modifications to the Whole Foods agreement. So really those are the major items. So beyond that, we have some money to do some things with some issues.
Fantastic. Thank you for your report. Anybody have questions? All right. Next item on the agenda is the Town Center Master Plan concept discussion with 7A's Company.
We're going to get set up here. First off, I want to echo your comments about Adam. It's been a pleasure for us working with you and the entire city apparatus. It's been interesting because Eric, who is he's not the least demonstrative advocate for the city of Chamblee, was very, when we were first talking about this, he said, one of the best things about the city is that we've got very qualified staff. He was talking about John, talking about Eric, and he was talking about you all on the DDA. And that, that's been our experience, and we've worked with most of the major municipalities around the region, and this has been a real pleasure so far.
Just getting started.
You haven't got a check yet.
Yeah, that's right. But so let me give us some context for tonight. As as you know, because we've tried to keep everybody informed all along the way. We are about at month 3 out of a 6-month engagement. And the milestone for tonight was to present 3 alternative master plans for you all to review with the now part of the public record. And that has not been done in a vacuum. We've had a number of public input meetings initially. We also had the planning session. I think we can go to the next slide. And yeah, jump to that one. And you know, there was a lot of good input. And then we had a second public hearing session where the community came in and also had a chance to kind of see how the massing of all these buildings work together. So let's flip back to slide 2 there. So if I can direct I'll work off this board. So in terms of directing Bob to go forward with these 3 alternative plans, one of the things that developers try to do is deal in the art of the possible, okay? And that means you all owned or controlled all of these blue parcels. You also own these other light blue parcels. And so as we suggested that we did a 3-phase assessment of the projected downtown development. And this doesn't mean that the city always acquires all of this land. It may acquire some of the sites that it doesn't own now. But the first step was to take Broad Street, establish it as kind of the center core of what Bob calls the crunchy master plan, right? I don't want to steal your thunder here, but and in that we provided that we would master plan out these parcels. One of the reasons we did this parcel, added it into phase 1, is because it's actually very strategic. It's located next to one of your best examples of a new condominium building built over retail, very attractive building, and this has the opportunity as one comes up Peachtree to be as much of a focal point as the City Hall is. The second phase would include these green buildings, which you can see are the green areas within the green site plan, which include all of your remaining tracts plus a couple of out parcels here, and then this one strategic tract that is owned. We have had some very initial discussions. Don can go into that again. But we also suggested that we might want to come and approach this owner and not necessarily cut through the side of their building, but create an additional access point coming off Broad Street on the side of their building that actually would end up enhancing the value of their site as we start moving the elevations around here to maximize this use. So now let's go to this. I thought was a really important slide because I think you all remember when Andrew and I came and appeared before the DDA at your very first meeting. We said you all have done so many things right. And you know, the first rule of medicine, the Hippocratic Oath, is first do no harm. And that's what we want you to see, is that as we look at this, these are all projects that have been approved by this authority or by the City Council and put in place since 2000. And you know, this begins down here at Whole Foods, Walmart, you have the St. Joe's building. You start to have in the colors are here. The rental apartments are in lighter green. Condo projects, which is actually a very impressive look. You have 3 different condo projects here, and even though this one's not colored green because it's retail with condos on top, you've actually got a pretty good disbursement of for-sale condo buildings in the city. You've got, you know, people think, well, you've got a ton of multifamily. You have a significant amount, but you don't have a ton. This isn't like going to the old 4th Ward today. With all due respect to my colleagues in the old 4th Ward. And then you have some office, institutional. St. Joe, we didn't know how to categorize them, so we put them in with office. And then, of course, the rebuilt Chamblee High School. And what it shows you is that there's been this progression kind of coming up from the old split in Peachtree Road and Peachtree Boulevard. So let's go to the next one. This shows you, we've shaded out some of those colors, and then we show you how critically important this plan is. Because what you're doing is that you're now kind of tying together these two areas. This, which is already pretty well established, you have the rail trail, you have the Peachtree Road improvements, with a master plan that eventually would include all 3 phases and go all the way down to Chamblee-Dunwoody Road. So that shows you how critically important this is to the overall plan. Anybody have any thoughts or questions about that? Okay. So now, what is this going to look like? Well, you have seen these sectionals. We'll go to the next one here. One of the things that's so important to create an exciting, vibrant downtown district is to get the scale of the street right. And if you go up to all of the new T&D projects around the country, I think of projects in DC, other places, is that what really makes it work is making sure that the building scale is right to the street, and that the scale of the street is also that it's comfortable on the side. And there's also a strategic decision: are we going to allow on-street parking? Because what that does is that pushes the right-of-way out. But ideally, we would like, through the Main Street corridor, which is Broad Street here, through this heart of the downtown, is to maintain a 90-foot corridor. Now, you've got a couple of buildings that are going to kind of push into that, but that's okay. But the advantage is it gives you the opportunity to do outdoor seating, a generous sidewalk, on-street parking along with a 5-foot landscape zone. This is a narrower, non-retail street. This might be Peachtree in some locations. Ideally, it would be great if you took our recommendations, would be to try and provide some on-street parking on Peachtree. If nothing else, just to keep the traffic slow. It's, the objective here is not to try and run people through here as fast as possible. It's to create a good retail pedestrian environment. And then this shows how, if you decide you're going to create a bike trail along with the street, you put it in here, and that pushes that out to 62 feet. Now, to give you an example of what that looks like, Bob's team took Broad Street from here at the Ingersoll-Rand intersection and ran it down here to Peachtree. And it shows you that if you sit just on the center line of the road today, you actually don't intrude on any of these buildings. You do intrude on what's the name of the antique store? This one? Yeah, Rust and Dust. A little bit of that intrudes in, but that's what is great about this plan, is that it gives it it looks more organic and not like it just was plopped down here by a land planner that's not as good as the Hughes Good folks. So what we've done is that we show you how that can actually work right there. And we're continuing to explore Peachtree Road, and we'll be looking at these other areas. All right. So, the other thing that you asked us to do was to, part of our assignment was to do a market study, which we did with Knoll Consulting, who did all of our uses except hotel, because we wanted to have a separate group look at the hotel. We had a hotel study done. Adam and John led a group, Clark Patterson, to do a needs study for the city to show the needs there. We had a parking group done by Park Simple, and Bob is here tonight representing them, to show if we put all of this projects, all of this stuff together, what does it end up from a demand standpoint over the next 5 years in the downtown market? What kind of demand could we expect under normal conditions? And that's what this shows you, is in rough numbers, a little under 650 apartment units about 50 detached single-family homes, which most likely would be to the north and across Peachtree Industrial to this location, attached townhomes, and attached condos for sale. We're actually talking right now, and we'll put these folks in touch with Bob as we continue to refine the plan. A group here in Atlanta that the principal lives here in Atlanta, but he's done some remarkable projects, both small number fine grained projects in Washington, D.C., and he loves the idea of coming to Chamblee. But there's a demand for 40 units of that, 120 key hotel that would probably deliver sometime around 2021, 2022, and that's based on current demand that's expected in the market. Then about 60,000 feet of neighborhood retail. Includes more restaurants, includes all those things that you all want to see happen. You know, and we've heard this time and time again from residents and also from members of both the City Council and the DDA. Last thing is Class A and B office. I think you may have seen that Kyle James' firm just announced their project on the east side there. They are some of the best. They've done some remarkable work around the city, and they've taken a good position in Chamblee, and it's great to have them doing their projects, the Trackside project, Parkside. But we believe that on here as part of the city center that there's an opportunity to do a office building that would be probably about 4 stories, including some retail on the ground level, front of the street. That could be a real attraction to tenants coming into the marketplace. So, now then the question is what about parking? Well, what it tells you, the parking study told us that today you actually are parking pretty well. You know, there's not a great need for additional parking in the city, but if you add this additional density, the total number of spaces you would need is about a little under 1,900 new spaces. That's a lot of parking. And you know, if you put that on surface parking lots at 150 spaces per acre, that's probably 12 or 13 acres of parking, which is, you know, I know y'all want that, right?
Right.
So,
Can we discuss this, or do you want to make the presentation?
Well, let me make it and then we'll come back to it. But one of the things that Bob's looked at is if we're smart about where we locate the decks, we can, and uses, kind of putting them together. The hotel and office can complement each other. There's different uses that work well together. We can probably reduce that number down to about 1,300 spaces. So, let me go to the next slide. And one of the things that we've looked at and Park Simple focused on was how do really well executed mixed-use development projects do parking well. And how many people here have been well, this doesn't show Charleston, but downtown Charleston. Are you aware that there are like 12 city parking decks scattered all through that downtown, and you don't ever really see them? Columbus has done a similar program, and this area I'm familiar with because I unfortunately had one of my children go to Pepperdine University, and this is down the road from Pepperdine. But it's a similar project, and the scale is not that different from Chamblee, even though it's Santa Monica. This area is 1940s kind of retail 1- and 2-story buildings that were built there. And for you historians, this actually is the end of Route 66 right here at the pier. But what they did is that they came in, they made this a pedestrian mall, they closed the street except for the cross streets, and then put some smaller parking decks all along the edge which allowed people to kind of come in and disperses the traffic, and the automobile doesn't become the focus of the development. So those are things that we're going to be looking at as we move forward from where we are now to the next phase. So if you want to ask a question now, I can do that, and then we're going to have Bob Hughes, or if you want to go ahead and let Bob.
No, I
do
mean,
his
the
presentation.
question that I just had in general, when we're talking about parking is has there, when we look at those numbers, was there any adjustment based on forecasted changes in demand?
Well, let me answer it this way.
You're talking about autonomous vehicles.
Autonomous vehicles or
Shuttles.
shuttles or people's use of Uber or, you know, all of the other things that looks like is going to dramatically change the parking landscape.
No, that's the right question to ask, and the challenge here, this is when Mayor Rustin Paul said that he wanted to limit parking in the city of Sandy Springs to any new office to 2 per thousand. The commercial development community went and told him and just said, you know, if you do that, you're not going to have any commercial development, because the people who invest money and lend money to developers who are trying to build these projects, they're going to say, you've got to have parking for the people who are here. We're not quite there yet. And so it's a dance with the people who are building projects. And the advantage that the city has, and I think at the end, you know, when we get done at the end of all of this, is that most likely we're going to recommend the construction of probably three or four smaller decks through here, some of which will be paid by the private developer, some of which you all will probably may be asked to contribute to, but we'll also have a revenue stream tied to support that, so that we can bring out of market traffic from Peachtree Boulevard up into these areas, park them, and then have a very walkable area in your downtown that you can take them to. But the market today, and I can tell you anecdotally, is that people saw that we signed Northside Hospital, moved their entire administrative group over into one of our office buildings, and they wanted 6 per thousand parking. You know, and our office building has 3.5, and we are actually building them, and this just drives me nuts, but we're going to build them 500 additional spaces on land that we expected to put an office building. So, you know, we have to deal in where the market is right now. And so I think as you bring people in here, the key to get, I think, is going to be to get the uses as much as we can to mesh together. And the investment and lending community do understand that concept, because it saves them money. It's like the hotel. You put the hotel with the office use, put the hotel even with the, you know, some of the retail uses, if it's more daytime traffic, you can mix all that together. So that's represented in that last slide.
Okay. And I guess from a strategy also, it seems like there's the potential to design parking structures for future changes of use.
Yes.
And there's actually an article in the recent ADA magazine that talked about exactly that, strategies for doing that. So, and the other thing that I would just like to throw out there is when you've got parking that is integral to the development, it makes it very difficult to change that parking in the future. But if you've got parking that is a standalone facility, that there are agreements, you know, for it, it seems like there's a lot more flexibility.
Well, and that's right. And then the other option is if you build a precast deck, for example, which is what most of the freestanding decks today are built, are all precast, because it's the most cost-efficient way to build a deck. Is that some people are studying that is it really less expensive when you look at the comparison of building a poured-in-place concrete deck, which is probably 30% more expensive, is it better to just build a precast, have it for 10 years, and tear it down when change comes? We haven't run those numbers, but I've had friends who have. And that we'll be able to talk with you all about that too before you make an investment in a parking lot. So,
That's all I
anyway,
have.
no, those are good questions. Any other questions? I'm going to turn it over to the Chamblee native, Mr. Robert
Good
Hughes.
dogs. And before I jump into this, I may just piggyback on that conversation for a second. You can imagine we have every one of our clients trying to figure that crystal ball out. One of the things to think about too is whatever parking we build with this initial phase, if we do strategically locate it, future phases may then not need, there's a difference in, we won't need as much parking and we need zero parking, which is kind of hard to fathom. Let's say we built 500 spaces to handle this much development, and the next wave of development, well, we don't need to build parking because now we have less demand. So it's a different way of getting to the same thing too. We see a lot of people trying to position our thinking that way too. You might call it hedging your bet. You know, I build enough,
Right.
and if I've got excess in the future, now I can cannibalize it into this development too.
Right. Yeah, no, I mean, absolutely. I mean, it's smart. You know, there are also management strategies rather than having, you buy a condo, you automatically get a parking space, separate the parking from the living unit so that the people can get the parking and not have the parking that they don't need. So,
And the other thing is there is a sort of critical mass threshold you hit. It kind of varies from suddenly you have enough development and activity that I can walk to the grocery store, that I can walk to a drugstore, that I can do those things. I don't need then to do it. I said, my wife and I sold a house. We actually live on the top floor of a 20-story condo building just south of Piedmont Hospital. And it's perfect. On Saturday afternoon, we can walk up to the drugstore, go to the drugstore, we can stop at a restaurant, eat lunch, we can stop at the cleaners, drop off and pick up our cleaning, and then we stop at the liquor store and get some wine, and then we go home, right? So we have everything within 2 blocks, and that's, I don't know how many miles of travel that it takes to do it, but there is a critical mass that comes along with it that you'll hit where suddenly people go. And then there's, we all said, Bobby, I know was just in Washington, D.C. People have walked 45 minutes in Washington, D.C. because it's nice. It's there. You know, if you walk, across the Chamblee Plaza Shopping Center, right? That's not nice. Who's going to do that? So all those things help as we start to put it all together. So talking about transportation, as we went through the exercises, and I can tell you all three, both exercises, I call it 3 because we had 2 groups on the Saturday morning, and then we did it with a lot of citizens that I see here tonight that were there. The enthusiasm of watching people just pick up the pieces and move them around and the ideas and stuff that came out of those were really fun to watch from our perspective. One of the things that came out of that is the rail trail comes up approximately here on Chamblee Dunwoody, and there was this whole question about, well, where does it go from here? And as we all know, we have a pretty good topographic change from Old Peachtree down to Peachtree Boulevard. And there's a rail line that comes around in here, and then we have the upper ridge. But really kind of merged out of this is this notion of, well, maybe it splits because the road's getting wider between the two anyway, and we have a high line and a low line. And as we began to play with that, we said, well, the low line's going to come around, and maybe they come back up and they connect here. So it's sort of a perimeter trail system, if you would, around the downtown. Then as we looked at that, we talked about the notion of how do you get pedestrians across, and the idea we put out, well, maybe there's a bridge, and this notion of when people are going down Peachtree Boulevard, how do they know when they're at Chamblee? Well, we put a pedestrian bridge across it because of the way the topography works. That could be cool, and now you know where you are. It's the big chicks of Chamblee is a cool bridge. And the suggestion was made, well, the place to do that is here. And it's absolutely right. If you want to do something fun, go sit in the parking lot of the liquor store right there. You can't quite get on access with American Industrial Way, but it's close enough. And you look back and you see this kink. And what's great is the Manapro building is practically on access here. You come across, you catch grade there, and we had a bridge there. That really began to do a lot of very, very cool things. But as you see, if we had this sort of perimeter, wherever we needed to take it off in the future, it could do that for us. So that became kind of a neat component of it. The other thing that came out of the sessions is, Bob kids me what I call the crunchy part of the city. It's just kind of put together in pieces and stuff. There's really cool bones right in this area. The old buildings are there, the one-story aspect of it. If we kind of came along this part of Broad right here and said, what if we infill with that same scale? 1 to 2 story, there might be a 2-story building in there, it would be fine. But we kept that kind of scale around it. It really is pedestrian scale. You can begin to take some of the gaps between the buildings and have outdoor dining on the side or almost alleyway kind of connections in there. It becomes very, very pedestrian. And a very cool and unique character to that. So then we talked a lot about the notion of we've got to do some sort of breaking down of these huge blocks. A huge block here that goes all the way through. There's a lot of literature on this, there's a lot of variety of blocks, but a 400 by 400 block is sort of a, accepted thing. If you go to New York City, they're really, more rectilinear than that. You go to DC, they're cut up in angles and whatnot. But you got to find it in the areas where the old city bones were anyway. It was smaller, people walked more, gives you choices of where to go. But we can kind of get into this dueling grid scenario too pretty quick. And we drew several of them, and you can just see them, different ideas, different ways of doing that. But all of them with the idea that we infill this component in there. So then there was also, from day one that we met y'all, everybody has starved for this sense of a gathering space, public space in the future. And so we began to look at that as well. And so we just go through a couple of examples here. The idea here was this really is pretty cool. What if we centered something on that? What does that feel like? You have the low area in here. We layer around it height, so the taller buildings are back to fill that in. This becomes very cool and a unique experience. And then it's connected through to a different experience, and maybe that orients itself back out. The high line and low line, you can begin to see here the distribution of the program. It's not, and I think you'll see if we click ahead here, we jump to a different part. Yeah, so if you look here, just different shapes on the park, which ones make the greatest connection between these two. The idea that there's a new city hall really gravitated to the notion that this location is pretty cool because it addresses the park. It's very, in a sense, traditionally civic. You have that civic use on that civic space. But then you could come out the backside of it and be inside of this environment. And so it really kind of says, yes, it's a city hall, it's civic, but you walk out the back door and you're in the crunchy part and hey, we're Shambo, relax. It gives you a little of both of that. That's a very unique and fun character to it. We played with the idea of the bridge. We got talking about the bridge over Peachtree Boulevard, but here, this is where Chambly Dunwoody goes under Old Peachtree Road. We have what's really simply there now, a pretty utilitarian kind of DOT bridge. But if you came and just put this kind of structure over it, doesn't even have to touch the bridge. Now all of a sudden there's a gateway element that begins to recall the sense of the railroad and the history of the railroad, brings that forward, and as you're coming into where is that sort of landmark boundary between the downtown core and other parts of the city, a device like that could really begin to set an interesting tone as we move around. is we took the end of American Industrial Ways and just looked at a couple of things, the same sort of couple of span bridge like this. We did arches. Who knows what the design of that is? But if you're going down Peachtree Boulevard and you pass through that, that's iconic. And what it does, not only for the passerby, the value of that, but symbolically what it does to literally bridge over that barrier is pretty strong. And you know, we can take it from there and connect up to the high school. Let's say early on the notion of how do we get to the high school? How do kids from the high school be able to walk downtown? You know, that becomes a very powerful kind of gesture out of it. We talked a lot and began to collect some imagery about the sense of rail. And I love because railroads, you know, in one sense are, you know, the heaviest of industrial, but they're also the coolest in design. You know, there's a whole period of time where locomotives were pieces of artwork to think about. And then you begin to look at some of the geometry and elements that are in the flow of this, of train tracks. I'm a train track nut. I just love the geometry of them and that, and what they do. You see this here. And then just simply, you know, can we find a wheel? I mean, just imagine a kid walking the wheels twice as tall as you are. So there's just kind of fun things that come with that too. And again, to be able to take traditional sort of railroad lighting and take it into a light standard that begins to bring that character in. Not to get on any of the wonderful cities that fixed up their downtowns around there, but everybody has the same deal, 1890s light. What's different? What's it about us? And so begin to pull those sorts of elements in a lot of different ways can be fun. And then even as we get into paving, again, looking at this, and what does that tell us about, you know, shapes, forms, things we do that are bringing a lot of different design elements in, but they're all derivative out of this flowing geometry of the railroad. That becomes a common theme. You could give that theme to 50 different designers and artists, and they can draw maybe 50 different ways to begin to express that in the collection of it. So that's kind of what we've been through. That, you know, we're still trying to figure out, again, working with y'all, what is the right place for that park as we move here. I think we talked about in some of the meetings, and we've drawn it different ways. What I will say about the park is a rectangle has a bigger perimeter than a square. You took a square that was 2 by 2, the area is 4, has a perimeter of 8. If you take a rectangle that's 1 by 4, it's 4 with a perimeter of 10. So if you think about value creation, shaping that space so that it works for all the activities that you want, but you're creating a little bit of beachfront property at the same time, so that ultimate shape of that may help, you know, drive some of the value proposition. Any questions on that?
So really the primary difference we kind of focus on, there's a consistent theme through each of the 3 alternatives. One is a connection point across American Industrial Way, which your mayor has renamed American Way. You have to go through the post office.
Yeah, we gotta work on that.
Yeah, we gotta work on that. I like that.
But thanks for teeing it up.
Okay. And, you know, but that was a common theme. The other thing was a desire to make sure that as part of our initial phase, we provide a good gathering place, which at least in this concept would likely be initially in here if we move to a couple of strategic decisions for the DDA and for the city would be to move the police station to another location. I know there's been some initial discussion about that, but what do you say, Bob? You say that if you take all the different uses that you have, which of them are additive to what you're trying to create? And as essential as this is probably what you want to put in the heart of your downtown. Has anyone been to downtown Cumming recently? Probably not. Well, we do work up in Forsyth County. Well, in downtown Cumming, that is beautiful courthouse, and on one corner they have a beautiful government building on the other side, and then on the other side, they've got this massive jail. It's the biggest thing you've ever seen. And it's just like a buzzkill on the whole downtown. I mean, a complete buzzkill. And this is, if we can move this, it gives us, one, it frees up a lot of surface parking to use for other uses. You've got a lot of acreage taken up with that, and it gives a chance to work with these property owners. And this is a great project. These are all great buildings. It gives them a chance to redevelop their buildings because we're going to be substantially enhancing the value of their land and their improvements. So, but the long-term vision obviously includes the 8-acre parcel. And that's where the bigger vision of creating a new city hall, overlooking, taking advantage of this space and creating possibly an amphitheater type arrangement down to a larger village green would be an outstanding gathering place for the community. So.
I love how you've created that envelope of 1 to 2 story buildings. I think going back to when we had our initial needs and we wanted to keep some of the personnel understanding how it was, one of the big concerns I kept hearing was 8-story buildings and 5-story buildings, and I think 1 to 2 story buildings. I guess that would be a zoning decision that the city would have to make in order to preserve that. Right?
Probably do an overlay, ultimately do an overlay that would also create the new, the street level improvements. I mean, one of the things that the city of Atlanta has done, and yes, it's legal, is that whenever anybody develops one of these mid-block projects where they have a long, street frontage, is that I think it's 600 feet?
600 feet. You can't go more than 600 feet without having an intervening street. So what they're doing through the zoning, this is all throughout Buckhead, Midtown, they're about to adopt what they call an industrial mixed-use zoning, where you would even do it there on old industrial sites. And what it does, it simply says the pattern. One of the things that we have learned the hard way in the city is you can't put urban densities on a suburban pattern. You think about the densest, most well-functioning part of our city right now, the whole metro area, is Midtown Atlanta, but it's built on a system of blocks which allow that disbursement of movement around it. You get what's referred to as super blocks, which is what I would call this whole area right there. You got to move around. All your traffic has to move around. To walk from here to here is a daunting task. So it is creating a pattern that will accept the densities. It's part of what we refer to as an armature or a framework. And lots of overlay zonings have gone to do that.
I also like the idea of moving the jail out of downtown. I don't think I ever thought of it quite as being what Forsyth and Cumming has, but
It's not that
I've always thought that was a good idea to move that somewhere outside of the downtown area.
They have it in Savannah, they have it, well, it's split up, the city. I forgot the route that it's on.
The jail.
The jail and the courthouse, yeah.
They're really, you're bringing a market here, and most people who are going to spending time in jail aren't stopping for dinner on their way.
They get Waffle House.
So.
They get Waffle House.
But to use Savannah as an example and compare it to Charleston, if you think about downtown Savannah, one of the big negatives are the big, tall parking decks that they compete with the beautiful Customs House, with some of the other historic structures, and then you've got these monstrous decks. Now, that is the most cost-effective solution, but it really dramatically impacts the beauty of the downtown area, which Charleston, Joe Riley, who's going to be speaking this fall at a ULI event that I'd encourage, we'll send you all invitations. he was merciless. I mean, he was so vigilant about that, and you need, you know, this is why, again, I say that Chamblee has done this better than anyone, I think, in Metro, in your competitive set, in terms of creating and keeping this, the scale correct and making the thing, making all the pieces work together. So, you know what, can we go to the slide that talks about the streetlights and the, one of the things that we want to do here is, let's go back to the bridge slide. One thing I want you all to think about is that, if you go to one before that, okay, why would you do this? Well, because when we create this new downtown district where you're gonna, you've got some beautiful new streetscape coming up Peachtree Road, but once you go through this bridge, or you come around the corner from Third Rail Studios, you're gonna enter this downtown district, and we want it to be different, right? Want it to be, you know, and it's gonna be such an interesting destination that people will park and walk. You know, that's the goal, is that they're not, and one of the things that Bob suggested in our discussions is that, do you really need a 300-foot long left turn lane for the amount of traffic to make the turn there? Probably not. This is a DOT engineer's design plan. What we maybe ought to think about is, do we widen these sidewalks out a little bit? Do we provide on-street parking? You still have 2 lanes. But do we make this kind of like the gateway into your new downtown district that includes, you know, this, thinking about this project, I know that Eric has mentioned from time to time the opportunity, maybe you bring that building, the streetscape out, you know, so that it has more of the inviting feel that Taylor, you and your guys have done with the Rust and Dust project. I mean, that's just a perfect example of the kind of things you want to have done here. So, and you know, think about this too, is that whether the city hall stays in its current location or moves, this frames that building. You come right through there, it's right here on the corner. It just says a lot of really great things about Chamblee.
It cozies things up too. It
Right.
brings, there's so much open, there's the street and then there's the style.
Right.
And there's nothing that makes it a little bit more intimate this time.
I like what it does spatially. It really scares me that you start pasting on some wannabe elements, and it's so easy to get that value engineered, so you end up with this.
Yeah, that's where you want to be careful.
You know, idea of it, but it just looks cheap and pasted on. And whatever we do, I want to make sure that we don't get there.
You know, that is a great comment, because there is one thing, if rail is going to be part of it, if rail is for sure, it's strong. You know, it's got weight to it. When you pick up a piece of rail and you look at one of those locomotives and the purity of the geometry, it's not thin and it's not light. So that's a great comment.
I mean, I look at some of the things that they're doing on the bridges.
On
You
the
know,
interstate,
on
so
the
it's
interstate
one more
bridges,
piece than all that.
and that's exactly it. It's pasted on, and okay, it's not a regular bridge, but it's still pasted on. To me, it's just inauthentic.
It's like wrought iron railing today. Nothing wrong about it, it's not.
Right,
Exactly.
or it's what people are doing to, you know, old buildings to dress them up. You know, no, don't just let it be what it is. And so I love the idea of doing a gateway there. I love it. It's a great spot that things change, but I just want to be very, very careful that what we do is authentic.
No, that point well taken. I mean, and, you know, I don't know yet whether they salvage these things, I don't know. I mean, you know, you can buy everything else, you can buy rail cars on eBay. But it's just something, we wanted to more just give you an idea of what this, it doesn't have to be this exact design, but to give you an idea of what could be. So let's go to the slide that shows.
Can I ask you a question about that real quick before you go on?
Pardon?
Can I ask you a question about that before you
Sure.
before you do another slide? You got Chamblee up there as what you're offering up as the gateway to. Was that just put up to show a representation of the design element, or are you suggesting that the downtown area be branded as Chamblee and not like maybe downtown Chamblee? Have you guys?
No, we haven't done that far
Yeah,
at all.
that
It's just
is,
representative of, it could have, it could say downtown, it could say anything.
Sure, I'm sorry, thank you.
No, that's a good question. I mean, and that, you know, one of the things that the Knoll Consulting people said, David Lovey, who's with Knoll Consulting, said that we did our market research. He said your biggest problem is that people come down Peachtree Boulevard. I've got it right. Where's it?
There you go.
I've got it right 3
Said it
times
wrong.
tonight.
You said it wrong once. You said it wrong once. I think you only one
I
wrong.
was, when did I say that?
Yeah.
Beginning.
Okay, sorry.
We'll keep it.
Okay,
You're doing it, Bob your head.
okay, so,
I got it right.
You did get it right. Yes, you did.
yeah, he got religion. Okay, so, you know, you need a place to turn. See, I live in Corn Cob County, and everyone knows that if you're going to Marietta, you go to the Big Chicken and turn left, right? And not that this is a lot cooler than the Big Chicken. But it's more, he was just saying that you have something that tells people, here's where you make this turn and you're going to be heading to Chamblee. And for your retail and your, for the retailers that you want to attract and create this very cool downtown, you're going to need directional signage somehow to get people in. And you also want to direct people in, not down Peachtree Road up in front of Third Rail Studios. You prefer that they come in off the main arterials and park in your depths and then go in from there. So there's a lot of thought that's gone into it, but like your question, all these are just representative, illustrative design elements. They're not, nothing's been fully vetted. Oh, Andrew, let's go to this national. National after that. Yeah, not back. Okay, so here's the idea here. These again are Bob's. These are just representative of what some people have done. But the notion is that when you get inside this district, is that you have kind of a unique lighting pattern and streetscape pattern that is probably a little more fine-tuned and detailed than what you might have even elsewhere in the city. You know, that the downtown district has this kind of very cool architecture to it. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's, and again, it's struggling to make it, it's not struggling, but it's searching to find what is that unique character. So somebody doesn't say, oh, that's cool, I saw that in Duluth, or that's cool, I saw that in McDonald. Now, this is about the, in today's world, this world, you said authentic, right? What is authentic about this? What brings forward this bit of character that makes it unique?
So we don't know what that is. Again, these are not specific designs. It's more of a panoply of images to give you a perspective kind of what it could look like, just to give you more of a sense.
I think it's all been very well presented and very well done. These three options that you presented tonight were pursuant to the timeline that we had set down, start narrowing the field of what we're going to be doing in the future.
Yes.
Right? Okay, so we don't, if there isn't any,
Do we need to provide feedback this evening?
I would like to provide some feedback, but here's why I proposed that we did. Because this is the first time we're seeing it, I don't want to get into like A versus B versus C. I think that defeats the purpose. The things that I thought were common to all the, could you go to version C?
C, yeah.
All right, so the things that, what I'd like to do is find some things that we have a little consensus on to to make recommendations to city council on, because obviously there's a lot of this that we don't have the ability to dictate. So there's nothing for us to vote on per se. But I think giving direction to you guys moving forward, and, well, most of the council's here anyway, but if we presented the council with a couple of resolutions saying we sort of like this, then I think that starts moving us all down the road. And as the timeline for this initial period ends in June, and after that, we've got to get some hard decisions done, so we need to keep moving somewhere. If I was going to start, my initial proposal would be that envelope of 1 to 2 story buildings. It's common, an envelope of some sort is common in all 3 options, and that tells me that you all thought that was fairly important. And I think that's consistent to what I heard the public say about keeping the character of Shannon. Is there anybody who has a strong feeling opposed to making a reference to that to the council, that we like that idea and sort of keeping that, maybe playing with the shape a little bit? I don't think the shape changed from A to B to C.
No, it is stayed consistent.
Okay.
That's B, I mean, it's all 1 to 2 stories.
Yeah, I mean, there's some changes in how you lay out buildings within that envelope.
Right.
But definitely.
Sure, and that's going to be dictated by what the city decides to do with their buildings, and then what a private developer might want to do.
Well, and I think it's also the recommendation that we advise the city that we do think that the police department should be moved and would like to get their input.
So I was going to get, let's save that one for the next. If it's okay, unless somebody's opposed, I'd like to make that recommendation to council that we really like the idea of that envelope of 1 to 2 story buildings. Again, it's not a formal vote, it's not binding on anything, but it's directional. The next thing is the, go ahead.
And why not 3 stories?
You know, it's maybe the one rung too high theory behind that. I don't have a scientific answer for you. I think if you start getting 1s and 3s, you have 4 or 5 behind it, it sort of doesn't feel quite like it's pulling it down as much. So it's probably more of a subjective than objective answer or feeling on our behalf.
I've seen it done well, and I sort of like the 3rd story. I still think that is the human scale, especially if it's living space, because that also allows the person living there to feel more separated from.
And I think it is important that we start pushing to scale up from 1 story. You know, so from my side, but I hear exactly what you're saying, going from 1 story, especially 3 stories when you're looking at an 18-foot ground floor plate, it starts making that 3rd story fairly far up there. When you start comparing it to the existing 1-story buildings, I think they can look pretty tall. But I think the importance of all of the new buildings being 2 stories starts making that transition from the old single-story buildings to what's going to be coming in. Because, you know, efficiencies of scale start really hitting at 4 to 5 stories for a lot of time.
Yeah, and it could be that if we want to give more variety, and maybe it's that up on the street, if there were a 3rd floor, if it stepped back and went up, that there could be a way to accommodate that and address sort of your point and our concern of, you know, a 3-story wall at the street. It feels a little tall.
There have been a ton of studies done by folks. In fact, Reston Town Center was my first education, where done by the Rouse Corporation back before, you know, a lot of this they were some of the first new town developers, but the whole idea is the width of the street and the height of the buildings on that street is critical in establishing a pedestrian zone. And what they, as Bob just mentioned, is that what they did is that they had low density stepping back. And in fact, that, you know, with the Vintage Pizza and condominium building here, this actually is a pretty attractive site to do office because the site falls off down here. There's an opportunity to create a alley, but to create a spot where you can bring the rail trail up through here, but you're gonna be stepping the building back from the retail that's up on the street for the very same reason that he's talking about. Is if you start building buildings up on the street, and again, this might be a 5-story building total, which if you put it right up on here, it's gonna diminish.
Right.
Except in that area, you've already got vintage that's 5 stories.
It's 3 or 5.
It's a porch, but
Hard to tell with the windows. I guess those are 2-story units, but
Yeah.
and you have, they're double stacked as well.
It's pushed back up off the road too.
yeah,
So it's not on the road, it's not.
right.
And if they're successful, and I know Vintage wants to, I've talked to Mario today, if they're successful in bringing the front of the building out into the parking lot and bring them straight, then you would have that, again, 1 story, 20 feet high,
Yeah.
and then step back up, and the next building would look very similar to that.
Yeah, I think this is a starting point for
Yeah.
starting a zoning conversation, because if that's what we're gonna do, we would have, there has to be a limit to something.
Sure.
Right? Right.
Yeah, I would probably take that 3rd floor, just thinking about it, step it back at least on a 1-to-1. So really, if you were down below looking up, you would perceive a 2-story building, and the 3rd would be back. It might work that way, certainly. Consider those kind of things as we refine it.
I think the idea of moving, if we could go to the jail conversation, is there anybody who thinks that there ought to stay in downtown? Again, that's a decision the city's got to make, that's a city building, there's an investment in there, but it seems to me that with where the jail is currently located, where the parking is, it's a much better use of that space to move the jail somewhere else. I don't know where that would be, so this is more of a general thought of,
You
we
mean the police precinct, it's not, the jail is a minor part, the police precinct.
okay. Well, whatever.
Yes.
I think it's going to be in our best interest to move that
Yes.
facility in whatever form to another location outside of this immediate area. I think that's something the city needs to start looking at sooner rather than later. Can we all kind of, do we agree on that recommendation?
Yeah, I mean, we have limited space that we currently control, and I think that's an important piece that needs to be up
One, and this is probably stepping on a couple of toes in this room, but, one of the challenges that you have is that you have a need for additional residential in your district, but under your current zoning ordinance, you have to build a separate use underneath that residential. And although I applaud that as a general zoning principle, when you add, if we start adding some of these smaller buildings, this actually could be a very cool extension of the rail trail down through this area, where there was at one point the rail spur that swung down here, came around, I don't think it went all the way down here, but it at least went this far. And, so you have retail here that create the width that supports that for the same principle that we talked about elsewhere. But there may be places where if this becomes more of a service corridor, it may not be in the best interest of the city, or the developer will be screaming to put retail down here if he's got it up in other places. So it's just something where we need, every rule looks great in the abstract, but you may need some flexibility in your overlay to, and it's going to be site specific. I can't give you an example now, but it may be site
I
specific.
think part of it is beginning to come through and identify the 100% retail streets. And then if you have a street that is not, I'm still an advocate for bringing an active use to the ground up, but that could be residential with a stoop. And therefore, if we took, in fact, the case, we laid out the buildings in the middle here, and then you see all the hatched area, we're way over our retail demand. If we
By
had-
2x.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's where you're, think, okay, well, what am I really trying to do? I'm really trying to activate that. I don't want blank walls coming down. And so are there streets that we would say, if Ingersoll Rand was one, that's really more of a residential frontage street. Then Broad is an absolute 100% retail street. So we would never have residential coming all the way to the ground on streets we identified as 100%. So it gives some flexibility.
So do we need the city to empower the planning department to come up with some variations on what the current?
Well, I also think that during the process that we develop we have pointing to Bob. We develop a master plan that we think accomplishes what we want it to do, and then that gets turned over to the city. And the city's challenge is to figure out, the planner's challenge is to figure out how do you define an overlay district that gets us where we want to go.
There's another step where zoning suggestions are made of the process, right? Okay. So I think that's gonna come, I guess.
Yeah, we're gonna be making recommendations on that. It's just like adding an overlay that Bob talked about. One of the conditions would be this, if you are developing more than X number of feet along a public right of way, you have to provide a break in the area. Think about the Guardian storage site, which is a great building and everything, but it's an industrial building and it probably has 700 feet of, and so if someone wants to come in and redevelop that or put multifamily on one side, they're going to have to break that block up, just so that you can start getting people through it. And developers will carp about that, but the reality is that if the city's assisting with the street, construction, the value of the land fronting that is going to be much greater than the loss of it. And you can give them the density that they're giving up. You can give them back that density to go up in exchange for them doing it. There's lots of things we can do, and that'll be in our list of recommendations.
In the initial phase, the main green space that you got planned there, all three plans, it looks like 2 to 2.5 acres.
Yeah.
That was based on John Walker's recommendation of what we need for the concert thing. Is that roughly correct? Let's put John right on the spot there, out of nothing.
Right.
He's managed to be quiet.
I think it's based on a combination of things. One is, what kind of events do you perceive, being there? And there has been, discussion about both flexible space and sort of concert venue space. They both could fit in that. Part of it was sort of a natural, that we're laying out a reasonable grid system. What does that come up to? And the 2 to 2.5 acres feels about right. You can put a lot of people in that, and we all attract a lot of people to events. But it's not so large that it feels cavernous if it's not in use.
Sure.
So it's a little bit like the old adage, don't design church for Easter Sunday. That's an event. Because if we were to take, if this were 2 to 2.5 acres in here, and you closed all these streets off, you'd add another acre plus to it for that event. So you begin to deal with it that way.
And that's 100,000 square feet. And that's a lot of square footage.
Yeah. I think in all three plans, it's roughly in the same spot and roughly the same.
It really is. I think what emerged out of this, if you would, is we're seeing this really becoming a very important win. So what's the configuration that takes that and takes it back here and sort of completes that move? It's almost like the bend right here is the knuckle, right? And so that park space is now in the knuckle of this, the hinge point of all this, which also feels good to us.
Yeah, just so you all know that Bob and I don't agree on everything. We had this discussion. He offended my French heritage. Huguenot, still French. Go back to the other slide. I was telling him I thought that it was, this had such a nice view, and of course, we've been in Washington for 3 days. Last week, we did a lot of walking all around the city. My wife and I said, wouldn't it be nice if these connected directly? And he said that looked too Frenchy. No, but the comment, and go back to the one, and I get this, because if you go to London or you go to towns in New England that aren't on an exact grid pattern, one of the nice things about these streets is that when you see a corner down there, it creates an interest that you want to walk down and make a turn. And it also creates, this is more valuable real estate, on these, where the lines are. So, I think that this, our two personal favorites is option A. And I didn't really say this, but these buildings are here for representation purposes only. They could go, you've got that demand, we showed you that chart. They could fit in a lot of different places on this chart. The only sites that are added on this piece are the Assistance League and the the Charterville, that site. So all of the other places are buildings that are land that you already currently control. We have the post office written in here as part of that area, but we're assuming that they stay out for the time being.
So which one of these do you think works best with the topography? It seems like because this is higher over here and this is lower, you're going to almost, you won't see that circle because it's going to have buildings in front of it.
Well, one of the beautiful things, Bob pointed this out in our first meeting, is that if you shade this hill down, if you have all this land to work with and you shade that hill down, that there's less than a 10-foot difference between here and here. So it actually creates kind of a nice bowl down here into the park space, and it creates the opportunity to do some very high-value real estate right there in that park and stuff.
Based on kind of what we control today and what we need to be able to, action on. I'm kind of leaning towards option A, but does that mean that infrastructure and that road that basically cuts up along the chart, whatever the thing is?
You mean along
Is that a realistic road that we could do in phase 1 without?
Well, there's a right-of-way there today. Hadn't been used in a long time, obviously, because there's trees growing on it.
We think we can get one in there.
So how much should we be thinking about what we can accomplish today based on the different options? Because the other two kind of dip into the, property that we don't control.
Well, I think you need to look first at everything in the side of the red line. Right. So, and that's why we drew it this way.
That's sort of phase one.
But that essentially kind of fast tracks your development of everything. If you can add the infrastructure and the roads without controlling that property, it seems to me like it gets the discussion on everything to the level that it advances that.
Yeah. Again, the bone structures and pieces to work for are right over here on Broad Street. Being able to change the character of Broad Street from kind of nebulous to feeling like a great street, filling in some of those missing teeth along it, what we call it the Ingersoll Rand track or whatever, this back piece right here, whether that were residential or an office in here, you can oversize parking in here. It's a very convenient walk from that out so we can get central parking into it. So there's enough, if we just chop this off right here and we're looking at this, there's enough going on in here that we feel good about it. So that by no means do we have well, that's beautiful, but we can't even take the first step.
Do you have thoughts on the city hall? I know it's represented in one of the drawings, looking through the bridge, but that's
Well, actually, and look at this, we've kind of done, City Hall is really this big, and here, we're saying there could be a repurpose expansion of this building. That's kind of been talked about, could that be a hotel location? Is it repurposed and added on as just typical office, or is it residential added to it? I think any of those could begin to happen in here. If the new City Hall were constructed here. Now, without the park, if we did this, arguably that feels like the front door of City Hall, front door for some period of time, but a great rooftop view, over it. But, I tell people, the past decade, I've been on the board of the Piedmont Park Conservancy, and you may have read that the mayor's going to buy the shopping center, the city voted to buy the shopping center on the corner of Monroe and Piedmont, so we can expand the park out. It will be 8 to 10 years before we can effectuate that project, because there's leases in there. And, our board got real excited and whatnot, and all of us involved, and said, guys, this is a very, very exciting moment, but think about this as a next generation project. Piedmont Park's been here for 100 years. We hold it in our hands for 10. It'll be here 100 years beyond us. So, there's that kind of thinking that's got to go into this.
So essentially what is inside the black dotted line is something that is very doable.
This to me is very doable
Yeah.
in here. This, whatever happens there, very doable. If it were residential, whatever kind that is, if you begin to add population that can walk in here, we begin to get those things going. And there's a lot of positive play off that. The way the topography again works here, being able to go down, do a little excess parking. So we're providing the shared parking scenario, being smart about that.
That's a pretty substantial development. I think the community will be excited about
Yeah.
that much development.
Well, and it will definitely create a dense, not high, but dense socializing
Yeah.
space.
Even if we took a space like this, where you see it green now, and said, you know what, we're going to make that a gathering space now. In the future, if this were done, maybe there's another building that drops back in there and this becomes different. If we take this part of the street, and maybe it's not asphalt, maybe we do something else with it. So if you close the street off, it just doesn't feel like I'm going out in the street to do something. So there's a lot of different, ways to articulate it, and devices to play with it that can give us some of the things we've heard people want, that if we all back up and say that, the best place for that is somewhere in here, then how do we solve short term so we can again improve downtown?
Well, I think one of the things we're going to have to work on sooner rather than later is going to be the decision on whether a city hall is a standalone iconic sort of building. If we reuse this building as City Hall, we'll build a new City Hall and keep this shallow facade, or I don't know what the proper term is. So I think we probably need to the city's got to make a decision on what they want to do because it's their building.
I think it bears noting that in terms of density, if we're keeping the inside, black dotted lines at, 1 and 2 stories, you're gonna have to start thinking about adding density, and I don't think this building or any of the buildings along the side are really appropriately sized for what we need to do.
Okay,
Just a thought.
I think it's good on.
That is stolen from the property.
Thank you. This looks fantastic. Like I said, I don't think there's anything for us necessarily to approve, but I know that when I saw the plans, I was very happy with them. They seem to be very consistent with the massing exercises that we've done before. I know we have a long way to go, but I think this is an excellent and very well thought out start.
So what do you need from us at this point?
Well, I would say, the direction you're giving us right now, our plan right now, that we haven't scheduled in the second, it'd be a fourth public meeting. But one of the things we'd like to do, we're doing 2 things right now. We're getting internet surveys in from residents. And you know where we are on that, totally?
170?
It's closing in on 200 comments. We don't think they all came from one person. So, but,
I'm using Facebook data to.
you know, that's right. But we're getting that, and then we want to schedule a similar meeting to solicit public input on this. So as we move forward, you know, I think that's real important. The public's been great. The citizens have been terrific through this whole process. A lot of good input.
I'll try to get an email out to the council. Obviously, most of you are hearing this anyway, but when we make our report next month, what's this month? It's next month. You know, hopefully that will be something that leads to action there, or at least discussion.
Right.
So,
This is great.
tremendous, thank you.
Thank y'all.
All right. Correct. I don't think so. I think we're back. We'll push it to April. Okay, on old business, the first item is the Arts and Business Incubator CDBG update.
Yeah, I'll go ahead.
Got for us.
I do have news. Probably not the news you want to hear, but at least it's news that we can then have a decision. This is more. So those funds, if you remember, for the Arts Incubator Business Incubator for 2015, essentially the county's saying, you know, the money's not there. It's not there. So yeah, what I recommend is maybe stepping back and seeing, now that we've got this great town center project, you've spoken all along about the assets that the DDA controls right now, staying in some portion of whatever happens, right? So maybe stepping back and seeing, well, what kind of thing could the DDA own in this center, and then if it needs funding like this, then do a new application when the time's right, and having kind of a great supporting documentation, and having the backing of all this public work we've done, of the public-private partnership, and then fill in the gaps with this funding. So it just strung it out too long. So and with the funding that was backed up last year that they were trying to spend, it just doesn't meet the goals that's in their general plan right now. That's the feedback we got from the county.
So is there an action item on that?
I don't think so.
Recommending that? Thank you for the update. Next item is a facade grant request for 5553 Peachtree Road and 5576 Peachtree Road. Robert, you're gonna extricate yourself from this.
Yep.
If I could also, I do have some language.
Yes.
If Dan's not here, if you
Yes.
want to go ahead and
Please read
that,
it.
and an update on what has already taken place. So, leaving the building. So the rules that Dan mentioned in the last meeting, the attorney, that any board member that could have direct action and benefit from a property recuses themselves, which Robert has done. The attorneys, this might be a belts and suspenders thing, but the board, the DDA needs to confirm a finding that there is a conflict and include that in the minutes. So we talked about it. It may just be good to just go ahead and resolve, that there is a finding of conflict.
So we need a motion to find there is a conflict with regard to 5553 Peachtree Road and 5576 Peachtree Road, the facade grant thereof.
Yes, and then the ad has already been placed. There's a requirement to put an ad in the paper 30 days before the consummation of any benefit. Now, that doesn't mean whatever the board decides is what the board decides.
Right.
The ad has already been placed. It's already run. We'll get it runs this week. So, but if there is any action that does go to the benefit of the DDA board member, then that benefit can't, that check can't be written until 30 days since the ad is placed. So it doesn't have anything to do with the action tonight. It's more about when it's consummated. That's the language involved.
So let's have a motion on the finding of conflict.
I move to acknowledge, to recognize the conflict between the board member and the application.
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All right, so there's a finding conflict between Robert and this particular facade grant request. The next motion is to recognize that there will be an ad placed. The next motion is that fine. There will be.
Well, I don't think you need a motion for that, it's already in place, I mean, that's just kind of the technical aspects of the law.
All right, so let's have a presentation on the facade grant itself. I know it was included. It's an application for $5,000 for 5553 Peachtree Road and $5,000 for 5576 Peachtree Road.
I can fill in blanks. You're probably pretty familiar with these buildings. 5553 Peachtree Road is the better known as the Whaley building. You see before and after pictures as part of the application. Building plans, it's 70,000 square feet. Actually, I'm going to be higher, I'm sorry, 70-year-old building is 28,000 square feet. Now into as an office use, former industrial use, with associated parking lots. I think that's all the application now requesting $5,000. The total property investment to date, $1.378 million. That's the first one. Now these are kind of joint application. They're right across the street from each other. 3576 Beachy Road. Formerly the Biggers Antique Building. Formerly it was a church, Methodist church. It's a 125-year-old now commercial building. There's new siding, new windows, new roof, new paint. It is currently been developed as creative retail and mercantile. As this plan develops, I can totally see this building being maybe a restaurant use or something a little more active too. But the parking is interesting over there. But that's a pretty good project with the office building across the street. This building, total investment $350,000. Again, the ask is $5,000. And there are pictures of the before. Sadly, the before does not have all the signs and cool stuff that was in the yard, but it is the before the building. And then the after picture of the building painted.
All right, are there any comments on, let's take the first application, 5553. Any comments or thoughts on that application? If not, do we have a motion?
Motion to approve the side grant for 5553 Peachtree Road.
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
So we need to put $5,000 in there?
We're just granting,
We're granting the.
we're just granting the application.
Okay.
That should be enough. Next is the 5576 Peachtree Road. Any discussion, comments? Do we have a motion?
Motion to approve the side grant for application for 5576 Peachtree Road.
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
That motion is approved as well. Thank you.
So we're going to come back in.
Just yell for. All right. Next item under old business is the tables and chairs lease with Biggers Antiques. Adam, do you want to tell us what's going on with that?
Yeah. The existing lease for your current asset at 2135 American Industrial Way is with the tables and chairs building, and that was a lease done with a commercial real estate agent. He was involved maybe when the purchase happened. So now that original lease is up, and I think we discussed in light of that building being more in the phase 2, kind of long term, is to not tie it up, with a long 4-year lease or 3-year lease as that was maybe going to year to year. Things have changed with John Robinson and his table and chairs business. While he wants to remain in the building, Billy Biggers, who's actually moved just up from that building as a sublessor, would take over the lease, the main lease, and then table and chairs would lease from him as a sublease, if that meets the board's wishes. Now, it's up to you in terms of terms. We haven't really gotten into the terms, specific, figures, and I don't really think we should do that right here either. But just think about that. Time is kind of the essence. So I think Dan McRae did create a very short form commercial lease, but it has some blanks that need to be filled in, and the tenant or proposed tenant may have different opinion on what those numbers are. So they did send a letter, I think I scanned it and sent it to you from his attorney. Questions. So there's really just a few things to kind of tick off on that and maybe bring it, I guess the next month. The existing lease ends April 30th, so it would need to be.
Should we move to authorize the chair to negotiate on the DDA's behalf? Would that be?
I think we should. I think before we move on it, well, we can keep the motion. I would like to make sure that we're getting the highest and best use out of that property that we can. I think we need to take that into consideration. This property's been owned by us for 3 years now? 4 years? 4 years. And we've kind of had it on hold because we're waiting for this proposal tonight. And it's not a surprise that it falls outside of phase 1. But now, I think I'd like to talk to you guys about whether this is a good use for it. If we're extending it 1 year at a time, that may make some sense because then it keeps the income coming in and covers the mortgage.
Well, I mean, year by year, with the ability to, for them to extend, or you all really determine is, I think it'd be fun.
Okay. So with that said, that's what I plan to do, if that's okay.
Yeah, and does this cut the representing agent, we not going to be paying him?
Yeah, this would be a holding lease, so.
Oh, believe me, I've got that. I'm on that.
Very good. Do
All
I
right,
have a second?
second motion.
Did you make one?
Yeah, just,
Okay. Rob?
I think, right.
all right, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries, thank you. We'll take care of that for next month. Make sure that's on the, do I tell you to put it on the agenda for next month? You're not gonna be here. Who do I tell you to put it on the agenda?
Or Lyndon will be here to assist you with the agenda.
All right, great. All right, next item is new business. We have the Chamblee Chamber of Commerce State of the City sponsorship. Last year, we sponsored a table. Was it the same cost, or is it a reduced cost?
Actually, right?
Yeah, it looks like it's different than last year, so that I got from the Chamber's website, and those are the 3 levels, or the 2 levels, so it is a little bit different.
I think we do the same sponsorship we did last year. If it's a lower investment, we certainly actually have the funds for it now that we,
The same tier, you mean,
the same tier, yes.
As supporting sponsor?
What's the next sponsorship level up? Is that anything different? It's still just a table, right?
This is that.
Are you missing something? I thought
That's what's on the website, but if there was
a presenting sponsor.
if there is a presenter, remember last year was the presenting, so if it's not there, then if you want to do the same tier, then we'll just stick with that, and I'll get with Aurora.
Let's do the same tier as last year. I think it's a good use of, we're the downtown development authority, and that's a good use for business interests in the downtown area.
Do we need a motion? Oh, sure. You want to? Motion to sponsor the Chamblee Chambers State of the City event at the same sponsorship level as previous year.
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
You get your money's worth.
That's right. There ain't an event there, Eric Clarkson. All right, next item is the Peachtree Station Annual Report. This is gonna be complicated now. I'm not asking for a vote on this yet because I don't have a solution for it yet. Peachtree Station is the Whole Foods development, which sold for $68 million last year. There isn't a provision in the MOU where we have to approve their annual report. However, their annual report is inconsistent with the tax digest. And what that means is, to my mind, they're getting credit for taxes that aren't yet due on that property because the tax assessor hasn't caught up with either investment in the property or the sales price. The tax assessor still lists that as a $17 million piece of property. The annual report, I think, correctly shows that they invested $45 million in it. And the sale price arguably makes it a $68 million property. The issue that I have, and Ben and I have been talking about this, and we've been talking about with Dan McRae as well, is that you burn off that tax abatement based on the tax dollars that you would have paid had they not been abated. If the tax assessor hasn't assessed the taxes, you can't abate more taxes than would have been owed in that year, right?
Right.
So the thought was, do we need to wait for the tax? Do we need to approve this? Do we need to disapprove it? Do we need to get the tax assessor to raise the value? Because most people are trying to hold the property value down, so it's kind of going the opposite direction.
I just want to point out one point, I know some of you all remember this, but we didn't, while there was a time frame on the years, we gave a bucket of money. And when that bucket of money runs out, the abatement goes away.
Right.
So obviously, if the value is now 68 million, that bucket gets used up quicker, it comes back onto the tax rolls.
No, I think
Make
that's-
sure
I think
we all
that's-
knew that and the public knew that.
That's fair.
It is, but it's inconsistent with the way.
Do we know when the tax assessor would nominally reassess it based on that sale?
You're asking to sell out.
And they may not do it at the 68.
The sale happened in December, so it happened last calendar year.
So we have to share it.
Right.
Yeah, that doesn't mean that it's going to.
Doesn't mean they got it.
It's more likely to go to the $45 million. I think from our conversations, we think it's more likely to go to $45 million than $68 million because the sales price of a property is not the defining factor in the tax assessor's calculation.
That's correct.
So this may be a whole bunch of nothing, and we may resolve this next month and then approve it, and that's fine. But I want to bring it to your attention because we've never faced it before, and I don't want to have us ignoring the fact that it is inconsistent with where the taxes would have been if the assessor had, if the taxes were being paid. This is not consistent with that at this point.
One of the points that Dan McCrae made to David and I in our conversations was, at what point does the DDA step into the conversation with the tax assessor? We can't obviously come and say, hey, we want to influence you on them. They have a separate job from us and whatnot. But at the same time, if they don't have it accurately valued, it's impacting the county, it's impacting the schools, it's impacting the city of Chamblee.
So it bears further discussion, and hopefully in the next month we'll come to some sort of a proposal of how we're going to handle this. We may have to talk to the new, not technically the owner, I guess, because we're the owner, but the manager of the property, the retirement fund that is now the player of it. It's just a bit of a mess. I want everybody to be aware that we're not ignoring it so that people know that we're handling it responsibly.
Have you talked with the tax assessor yet?
No.
That was the whole point. Is it appropriate for us
To advocate for higher taxes.
to reach out to the tax assessor?
Because we don't want to affect their business. Their leases are based in part on what their taxes are.
Yeah.
We don't want to.
At what point is the appropriate conversation?
It's complicated.
Does the city have a policy of arguing for different taxation, different assessment about amounts?
I don't believe so. If you remember when we did the initial calculations for the bond for title, was that it assumed that there would be a year one where this would be put into into service, and for a couple of reasons they opened later than we thought. So year one, while it did hit within the year that we thought it was kind of towards the end of it when it was fully up. So it already passed the year of assessment with the tax assessor. So I think our schedule contemplates that it gets to this 45, 48. Our schedule didn't contemplate that it would sell and go whoop, up to 68.
Right.
We would like, if we had that kind of foresight, that would be awesome. But
It sounds like since the city in general does not step into the evaluation business, I'm not sure the DDA needs to be in there either. But the city does have a position in that the taxes that the city's generated, the city gets, are based on the assessor's valuation of property. And so the fact that the city has never participated in that discussion, I think starts leaning towards the DDA of not participating in that discussion there.
I would agree.
Yeah, there's laws that govern assessment valuations, and it's a little bit more tricky than the other thing is it may be a premature conversation because the tax assessor would also be getting information in theory on all of the, construction permitting that's going on as part of their evaluation. So we're not going to know until the assessments for 2018 come out, which, we should know in 3 or 4 months or whatever those come out, so.
Right, it's something we've never faced.
What if they keep it at the 17 million? That's where it's at now.
It may be worth a discussion with the city attorney before we.
They're pretty spiffy on the spot. I mean, when I did redid my house, they had to do valuation.
I'm sure they would.
Right? I mean,
Well, again, I
within a
don't know that
month.
we necessarily have to step in. I'm not asking for an approval of an action. I'm just bringing it to everybody's attention because it's a detail
Yes.
that we've got to, and obviously this sets the policy for the next time this comes up, if it ever comes up again. I know this was a shooting star of a deal that happened, but if it happened once, it can happen twice.
What did they insure
Oh, I don't
for?
know.
Does that have anything to do with their assessed value?
I don't think the insurance does.
Property doesn't get destroyed.
Dirt doesn't get destroyed.
Right.
All right, so that's not an action item necessarily, that I just wanted to bring it to your attention. Hopefully by next month, we'll have a proposal on policy. And we'll decide what to do from there. Next item is public comment. Members of the public, thank you for being here tonight. We'd love to hear your input on what you heard from 7 Oaks or any of the other stuff we talked about. Anybody?
No?
I'll say something.
Please say your name, sir.
That's right. I think that I disagree with the decision regarding the Roberts project because I believe that it is a recent development project, and I think the public might correctly see that as underwriting developer profit on a project like that since it's so new. Glad to see the project come through. I just happen to have an unpopular opinion about that. I like your approach toward how it is that you're approaching your recommendations to council on the results of the work for the downtown project. I think you guys are right on the mark on that. And I can tell you that if I had an item as a council member of public interest as it relates to the well-being of the citizens, which I think that you guys hold in trust when you gave the tax abatement. I think that engaging the tax assessor office, at least as an inquiry on what the process is going to be like and pushing them along, I think there are a lot of people whose, I think the process has worked, and I think that you're doing the citizens justly by making sure that the property value hits the books as soon as possible. So I wouldn't personally, I'm not sure what the legalities are.
Well, technically,
But
we own the property, so.
Yeah, right. So I certainly wouldn't
I
have
don't
an
think
issue
you've ever had a property owner ask for an increase in value.
with you guys being involved at all in that. That's all I've got.
Anyone else? All right. The next item is an executive session. Do you have a motion to go into executive session?
For what reason, did I say? Motion to go into executive session to discuss a real estate matter.
Second.
All in favor? All right, we will go to executive session. All right, we're back from executive session. Do we have a motion?
Motion to approve the item discussed in executive session.